Hi, I'm Bart Prince, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Few large art museums in the world are dedicated to architecture as well as art. And joining us today is Adam Lerner, the CEO of one of them, the Palm Springs Art Museum. A few blocks away, there's more, the Palm Springs Architecture and Design Center of the Palm Springs Art Museum, and that's where an upcoming exhibition on architect Albert Frey, the patron saint of modernist design in Palm Springs, is taking place early next year. Curating that exhibition, we have the noted and in-demand Palm Springs and LA designer, preservationist, and returning podcast guest, Brad Dunning. And now the guy everyone wants to curate their blazer collection, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. As a totally unexpected benefit of going to stylish Palm Springs so many times over the years, I do have a few, let us say, unusual blazers.
Yeah.
That's after a life of conspicuously avoiding being fashionable. My highest couture is typically Nordstrom Rack. However, in Palm Springs, where color and style and texture are everywhere, there are quite a few wonderful men's clothing stores, both new and used, where orange really is the new black. The first one of these I bought is bright orange, which elicits comments anywhere I wear it around the country. The first question is, where did you get that jacket? The answer, Palm Springs. Next question, what is your job? And my answer is, I work as a traffic cone on the weekends. This garment is unmissable. Women from 18 to 80 always say something nice, but the men pull me aside and go, where can I buy one of those? So I hooked them up. Sadly, however, while I can rock the blazer, I just can't pull off the matching pants.
That's probably just as well.
We all have to discover our lane and stay in it. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Adam Lerner is the executive director and CEO of the Palm Springs Art Museum. Before that, he was the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art, Denver, where he tripled attendance over 10 years, not too shabby, and brought a whole new generation of visitors and patrons to the institution. Brad Dunning is a designer and independent curator with an impressive record of modernist restoration and preservation projects for very high-profile clients, some of them. He's worked on houses designed by A. Quincy Jones, Paul Williams, John Lautner, Richard Neutra, and Wallace Neff, among many others. Brad's latest curatorial project at the Palm Springs Architecture and Design Museum is Albert Frey, Inventive Modernist, which is set to open in January of 2024. Welcome to the show, Adam and Brad.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Gentlemen, how was the weather there this summer? I hear it was pretty hot. Can you actually fry an egg on the asphalt?
It was pretty hot, that's for sure. And I know about frying an egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't try that. Sorry.
I think we had a couple days of 120, if that qualifies as hot.
Uh-huh. Wow.
Does that change how you conduct your life during the day?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I definitely do not spend as much time outdoors, and, it makes things harder to get around, but you adjust. I mean, you just live a lot more on the inside during the hottest part of the day and spend a lot more time in the evenings outside.
And it gets down to like 80 or 90 at night, not too cold, not too chilly.
No.
It's about 85, 90.
Yeah, that's hot. Wow. We thought we had it bad here. And
It's nice in the swimming pool, though.
yeah, in humidity-based North Carolina, but that is pretty stark. So my hat's off to you.
It's a dry heat.
I love that line still.
It's a dry oven.
Adam, tell our listeners about the Palm Springs Art Museum, one of our favorite places. What's its origin story and what's its long association with desert architecture?
Sure. Well, first of all, the Palm Springs Art Museum has existed since the city of Palm Springs was incorporated, which is in itself interesting as an indication of the ambition for the city to have culture. But really, it was in the 1960s that the museum opened its main building right in the heart of downtown, designed by noted desert modernist architect E. Stewart Williams. And really, the museum has a sort of oversized sense of quality and extensive collections for a community of our size. It's really kind of extraordinary that we have about 150,000 square feet of buildings divided between the main building and an annex building, which is our architecture and design center. Not a separate museum, it's actually all part of one museum. And then we also own the Frey House too, which is designed by Albert Frey for himself to live in. So we have a pretty well-established collection of 16,000 objects in our permanent collection, as well as special collections and archives. So it's a pretty impressive place for the size of its community.
It really is. I mean, when you walk up to the building, there's that imminent feeling that there's something special going on there.
Yeah, I remember I'd been coming to Palm Springs for a long time, and I remember the first time I came up, I said, holy cow, this is the real deal. Like, I just did not think that a town as small as Palm Springs would have a museum with major work by modern artists. Like, you'd see Matisse and Calder and Lichtenstein and Rauschenberg. You'd see these major figures of 20th century art in an art museum in Palm Springs. And then, impressive too, the architecture and design collection. And we're very fortunate to be sponsored by so many generous donors.
Brad, before we talk about the Frey exhibition, I wanted to have you chat a little bit about a project from years ago, one that actually helped put Palm Springs modernism back on the map, which was the restoration of Richard Neutra's Kaufman House. How were you involved with that project?
Well, that was a very special engagement for me. The architecture firm in Los Angeles that you're quite familiar with, Marmol and Radziner, they did the major restoration on that house, I think up until about starting in 1997. The house had gone through many different owners, with each owner implementing their own layer on it, including, as we know, Barry Manilow at one point. So the house was on the market. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted to be in Palm Springs. I think it was $900,000 or something like that. So these two saints sort of purchased it, Brent and Beth Harris, and employed Marmol Radziner to do a major, extensive academic restoration. Really one of the best restorations I've ever seen. Now, at some point, they got a divorce. I think it was around 2005. And Brent Harris asked me to sort of take it over in terms of keeping it the way they had restored it, which in the desert is a major task because you're fighting heat, humidity, sun. So I always sort of liken it a bit to this Golden Gate Bridge. We would start at one end of the house, restore it, get to the other end, and start over again. Throughout my tenure there, we restored everything from terrazzo to textiles to the swimming pool. So I was just very honored to be able to keep it in beautiful condition for about 10, 12 years.
And that project is often credited as bringing in the boom of interest in mid-century modern in Palm Springs and Rancho Mirage and other places, that people took attention to this and said, oh, I could do this for my house.
Well, it certainly was a flashpoint, because up until then, nobody cared about mid-century out here because there was just too much of it. It was almost like, an embarrassment of riches. And so people just ignored it a bit. And also all the money had moved away. It was a very odd time for Palm Springs in the 80s and 90s. But God bless Brent and Beth. They put their money in here, and a lot of other people thought, well, this is great. And there was that house, and there was a steel house by Donald Wexler owned by Jim Moore, a New Yorker, actually, who loved it so much he would commute out here from New York. So the restoration of those two houses were the first major well-done restorations that I was aware of. And they really did become they were the snowballs that became the avalanche.
Do you think that because there were so many mid-century modernist houses in Palm Springs through the 70s and the 80s that they became almost like the background, almost invisible to people because they were so common?
Oh, completely. That's exactly the way to put it. Also, that style, it wasn't just Palm Springs. Nationally or internationally, that style was not popular. It had not been. There's always that gap in fashion and design and style. Some people say it's a 30, 35-year-old gap. If you know, when things get over that hump, then all of a sudden, if you look at Art Deco, you look at Victorian, you look at Edwardian, give them about 30, 40 years, and it's actually accelerating in this digital age. They tend to come back. You know, it's the same way with clothes and music and everything else. So luckily, a lot of Palm Springs didn't get bulldozed during that period because people just moved away. They just didn't care. And the desert land was so cheap, all the real money went, as we say out here, down valley. So Palm Springs was an amazing example of restoration by neglect. It just got ignored and sort of became the cheapest area in the valley. And so a lot of homes were rentals. And then when these two bellwethers we're talking about, Kaufman and the Wexler House, and then at the same time, the style was coming back into vogue. So all the dominoes were just lined up beautifully.
Now, Adam, you mentioned earlier the Albert Frey II House, which is perched on the side of the mountain above the museum. One of my favorite small houses on the world, just immaculate jewel box of a place. How did the museum come about getting that house?
Well, the Frey House, too, Albert Frey's second home that he designed for himself in the desert, was part of the estate of Albert Frey that he then gave to the museum when he passed.
And how can people visit it? Is it open during the year or just at special times?
It's open for tours throughout the year, and you can check our website. We offer tours regularly. We work with Modernism Tour in Palm Springs Life to be able to coordinate those. But no, really, the public has regular access to Frey House too.
But you can't just go up and drive by it. You need to get
you
the
got
help
to have
from
a
the
special
museum.
pass.
No, you have to go on with a tour.
Adam, you have had a career of success, particularly in Denver, in attracting younger people to the museum experience. Mm-hmm. And that's certainly a challenge in Palm Springs, where a lot of people have retired and are older. What are some of your strategies now for getting people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to be patrons of the museum?
Well, if you came to our opening party on June 10th, we had over 800 people in the museum, and at the beginning, from 5 till about 7, you can see more of our legacy audience, more people we've had as our audience for, 20 years. But then there were also like a lot of young people, a lot of people of color, and I really feel that the way that you get audiences to come to the museum is pretty consistent. It's pretty easy. You make people feel like they're welcome, they're invited, and you give them a good time. If you wanted to get donors to come to a museum, well, you have a cocktail party for them. And guess what? People who you want to have to the museum who are younger, it's pretty much the same technique. You have an event where people feel like they are welcome and invited, and you have a bar, you have some entertainment, and that's why people want to come to the museum. That's how people feel at home there. And then, of course, that's how you get, once people feel like this is their museum, that's how you get the regular, everyday participation.
Yes. And this new exhibition, Brad, that you have planned on Albert Frey, you've been working on this for some time, right?
Oh, quite a while, at least a year with the museum, and obviously longer with my writings and studies on Frey. It actually opens, I believe it opens January 12th. Is that right, Adam? And
yes,
it'll run until end of June, I believe, or early July.
Brad, when people come to the Architecture and Design Center of the Palm Springs Art Museum, what can they expect to see? This is a wonderful former bank that's been turned into an exhibition space.
Yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful little building right on the main street of Palm Springs on Palm Canyon. It's a very Miesian glass box, also designed by E. Stewart Williams, who did the subsequent larger main museum building. It's the perfect location for an exhibition on Albert Frey because Williams and Frey worked together and they were colleagues in Palm Springs for many years. So we're very excited about it. Right now, we have over 200 objects that are going to be exhibited or earmarked for the museum. We've got drawings, photographs, furniture, building material samples, newspaper and magazine clippings, many personal effects, and even some historic videos. Frey used to love his little 8mm camera, so he would document his life and his buildings throughout his life, which I think is quite special to see his work through his own eyes. One thing we're doing, too, with this exhibition, there's been a couple Albert Frey exhibitions, very small ones, decades ago. This one's going to be very special because it's not just his work, it's also about his life. So we have these amazing photos. We have a picture of him as a baby, a picture of him at 5 months old, a picture of him building what we think is one of his very first design projects. He would build his own canoes in Zurich, Switzerland, and test them out on the lake near his home. We've got photos of him going to university. We've got even a couple photos of him at his very first major architectural job in Brussels. We have a photo of him when he was working for Le Corbusier. He was one of only 2 paid employees at the time. We even are going to exhibit letters handwritten by Le Corbusier and Albert. One thing we're very excited about is we've commissioned 2 architectural models of 2 important works of Albert's that have been lost to time. One is the 1934 Coker Weekend Canvas House.
Oh, yeah.
That existed on Long Island. Yeah. Wait till you see this model. It's actually really quite stunning, I think. And then because it's one of the major losses in Palm Springs, we've commissioned a model of his very first home here, a beautiful little machine-age modernist box from 1940 that sat on the desert floor that he lived in until 1964 when he moved up the hill to what we now call Frey 2. So we're going to be by far the most comprehensive exhibition about Albert Frey that's ever been mounted.
So people can see the Frey 2 house, they can see the exhibition, and Adam, they can also see something called a luminaire. What is that all about?
Sure. Well, Albert Frey and Lawrence Coker designed the Luminaire House in 1931 as a model home for an exhibition in New York. And this became like this incredibly important monument of modern architecture. It was maybe the first time that Corbusier's ideas really were brought to form in the United States. It's sort of one of the earliest examples of European modernism in the United States, and it embodied this incredibly utopian ideal of creating affordable housing that could be factory produced. So it was made out of aluminum, thought to be something that could be actually standardized parts that could be manufactured in a factory, and to be able to give access to everybody of well-designed, affordable housing. And this is a house that had been dismantled for a number of years, and we are very, very fortunate to be able to have acquired the building and then to be able to erect it on the museum property.
What were its previous locations?
After it was on display in 1931 in New York City, it then was purchased by Wallace Harrison, the architect, and he brought it to his estate in Long Island. And it was there for up until 1987 when the property was being developed and was sold off, and it re-erected on the campus of the Long Island Institute of Technology until they closed down the campus and the building was subject to vandalism, and it was dismantled in 2012 and
put on a truck at some point.
And then the parts were placed in a tractor-trailer truck, and then the museum acquired it in 2020.
Okay, so it's been touring.
Yeah.
Mostly in the Northeast and Palm Springs.
Right.
Well, it's basically really kind of a snowbird because it lived most of its life in New York, and then now it's coming to.
Now it's coming.
It's retiring. It's retiring in Palm Springs.
Got it.
And there's a site at the main art museum building where it's going to be erected. How is this working out with the town and the restrictions on what can be done and what can't be done? Are people going to be able to go in it? Are they going to have a virtual experience? How is it going to work for people that visit?
unfortunately, people will not have access to the interior, and that's just mostly because of code reasons. Like we wouldn't have been able to have the building coded for disability and other things, meet fire code if we were to allow people in the building. And so we decided to be able to get it up. People can see from the exterior. And then we're working to raise the money to be able to develop a virtual reality experience so that people can experience the interior of the Luminaire house through an exhibition where they can see what the interiors would have been like.
Oh, that would be pretty cool. And I assume you can have cameras inside this house, right? So you'll be able to get photos and videos of how one would go through the house if you were in it.
Yeah, of course, today your fly-through of a 3D model will be like probably much better than if you were to actually take a camera in the building itself.
Okay. When will this be finished, do you think, at this point?
We told the public that it would be ready the first part of 2024, and we haven't officially changed that expectation. But right now, the construction schedule looks like it will probably be done even before the end of the calendar year. So it'll probably be done by the end of 2023, even though it might take us a little bit of time to have a grand opening for it and celebrate the erection of the building and then allow people to have regular daily access to it.
Okay. Now, Brad, you're no stranger to Albert Frey. You were on the Historic Site Preservation Board back in the 90s when the Tramway gas station and a few other Frey buildings were designated as historic sites. So tell our listeners, what's so special about Albert Frey in Palm Springs?
Albert Frey in Palm Springs is an amazing moment in time, and not coincidence, but amazing serendipity in a way. He was the first architect who had worked for Le Corbusier that immigrated to America. So he physically piggybacked European international style modernism to the USA, which in itself is a major achievement. But then to think of the luck, I guess, for lack of a better word, that he ended up in Palm Springs. I mean, and as small as Palm Springs is today, it's really a town of maybe 42,000 people. So the fact that he ended up out in the middle of the desert in this remote, removed place, but still practicing what he had learned from Le Corbusier is something very special, I think. And that's what the exhibition's really going to emphasize. Although there is what is known now as the Palm Springs School, there's definitely a group of major architects who worked in Palm Springs and created this look. Frey's work has always sort of stood alone in a way because it's much more European. It's more constructivist and expressionist. It's a little more monumental, I would say, and international than the regional architects that worked here. So to follow up on Adam's point too, I can't think of any other example where a town, no matter what size, will have the first building an architect built in the USA, and through, if my math is correct, about 68 years later, the last building he did. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment for Palm Springs to have this timeline of a world-class architecture, now with the Luminaire House being here from his first building to his last. So we're going to celebrate this throughout the year in 2024 with the Frey exhibition, many Frey events and symposiums and presentations. And then the culmination will be the grand opening of this Luminaire House to the public.
Adam, when people visit the Palm Springs Architecture and Design Center, there's an additional feature they may not realize, which is the Walk of Stars for architecture right along the sidewalk. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's what's in between the two.
The Walk of Stars is a program that is really run by the city and the Chamber of Commerce. And it's actually really says something extraordinary about Palm Springs, that you actually have this Palm Springs School of Architects. You have architects actually have stars in the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Like how, what a great city.
And they're right next to the movie stars.
Yeah, exactly. To recognize, great architects like Albert Frey or E. Stewart Williams.
Yeah, Richard Neutra, John Lautner, I believe even Nelda Linsk, who was in the famous photos of the Kaufman House, she has a star next to the museum.
Yeah, they tend to group. It's wonderful because, as you guys were saying, they tend to place the architect stars right near the Architecture and Design Center. So it's a bit of a vortex for design heads that come to town.
Is that the new expression, Brad, design heads? I like that.
It might be now, if you deem it such.
Now, Adam, you have a track record of fostering some really refreshing museum programming, like you put in a rooftop bar in Denver. So any plans for a rooftop bar in Palm Springs?
I don't think the architecture of the building allows for a rooftop bar. But, I do believe that museums really should be social places. And so we've had a lot of events at the museum, and we will continue to be a gathering place for people. And I think that's people do want to experience art alongside it's connecting with friends. Art should not just be a religious experience, and it should be something that's a part of your everyday life. And I do believe that the restaurants and bar is important. We just opened a new restaurant at the museum that is really exciting. Please come by for that.
Oh, yes. And of course, if you've not visited this building, then you can't miss its world-class theater, which is sort of buried in the basement. Just a stunning visual feast of a performance hall where you can see lectures and performances and things like that during the year.
Yeah, no, it's true. The theater is one of the most beautiful aspects of the building. It's this explosion of color throughout the building. Primarily, Easter Williams' intention is to use the natural color of the material. We have this explosion of orange in this beautiful theater. We'd like to be able to get back to that place. We're building towards allowing performance and theater to be greater part of our program.
Now, Adam, are there other art and or architecture exhibitions in the pipeline for after this one?
Yeah, we have an exhibition right after this one of a young designer named Ryan Preciado. He's a really fascinating maker who has spent a good amount of his time doing some fabricating works of some of the great modernist designers, but then also makes his own work. And he's going to explore this relationship between his own design practice and the work he's done of these classic modernist works. And then after that, we have an exhibition curated by our adjunct curator of architecture and design, Robert Kett, which is an exhibition called Building Meet People. And it's about how buildings take a life after their interaction with people.
Oh, yes. And particularly buildings that are hated in the beginning. You just give them 30 years, then people will love them. That happens in modernism all the time.
And the exhibition explores also how architects accommodate and consider the human usage of a building in the design process as well.
The exhibition is Albert Frey, Inventive Modernist, which opens up June 13th and runs through June 3rd at the Palm Springs Art Museum, Palm Springs Architecture and Design Center. Brad and Adam, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You can see more about Albert Frey's houses at usmodernist.org/Frey. Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Palm Springs, Malibu, Los Angeles, and Toronto.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.2 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with Kelly Policelli on guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back soon with another highly curated, architecturally significant edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.